A millionaire, upon seeing a poor mother with a boy in a wheelchair at the market, decides to pay her bill. The woman then reveals an unexpected connection to his late wife by saying her name, and he begins to question the truth. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay with us. Marco Senna stood at the window of his penthouse office, gazing at the city skyline as rain pattered against the glass. The grey clouds mirrored his mood, a perpetual state of melancholy that had become his constant companion since losing Elisa 3 years ago. As CEO of Senna Innovations, one of the leading tech companies in the Pacific Northwest, he had everything money could buy, yet felt nothing but emptiness. "Mr. Senna, your 2 o'clock appointment cancelled, and the board meeting has been moved to tomorrow." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Thank you, Diana," he replied mechanically, not taking his eyes off the Space Needle in the distance. Marco loosened his tie and checked his watch, an antique Patek Philippe that Elisa had given him on their 5th anniversary. Memories of her flooded back, her smile, her laugh, the way she would furrow her brow when concentrating. The official report had called it a tragic accident, a rainy night, a sharp curve, a faulty guardrail. But something about it had never sat right with him, questions he had buried along with her. "I should head home," he muttered to himself, though the thought of returning to his empty mansion in Medina held no appeal. On his way out, he nodded to the security guard and made his way to the underground parking garage where his Tesla waited. He drove aimlessly through the city streets, passing the familiar landmarks that had once meant something when Elisa was beside him. Everything had lost its color since she'd been gone. Without really deciding to, Marco pulled into the parking lot of Westlake Grocers, an upscale market he'd never frequented before. Perhaps a change of routine might at least provide a distraction. Inside, the bright lights and soft music felt jarringly at odds with his inner turmoil. As he wandered the aisles, selecting items he didn't need, his attention was drawn to a woman struggling at the checkout. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, with chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Beside her was a boy of about 10 in a wheelchair, his curious eyes taking in everything around him. "I'm sorry, but your card has been declined," the cashier said, not unkindly. The woman's face flushed with embarrassment. "Could you try it again, please? I just deposited my paycheck this morning." Marco found himself moving forward before he could think about it. "Excuse me," he said. "I'd like to take care of this." The woman turned, startled by his presence. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly—" "Please, I insist," Marco said, sliding his black card to the cashier, who recognized it immediately. "Sir, it's over $200, the woman protested, her pride clearly wounded. "Mom, we need the groceries," the boy in the wheelchair said softly. His voice was clear and articulate, with a maturity that belied his age. Marco smiled at the boy, then at the mother. "Consider it my good deed for the day. No strings attached." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Thank you. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my son, Ethan." The surname sent an unexpected jolt through Marco. Mitchell, Elisa's maiden name. A common enough name, he told himself, surely a coincidence. "Marco Senna," he introduced himself, noticing how Sarah's eyes widened slightly at his name. "Senna? As in Senna Innovations?" There was something in her voice he couldn't quite place. "That's right," he confirmed, helping the cashier bag their groceries. "Mr. Senna paid for our groceries, Mom," Ethan announced, as if his mother might have missed this fact. That's what Elisa would have done too. The air seemed to freeze around them. Marco stared at the boy, his heart hammering in his chest. "What did you say?" Sarah quickly intervened. "Ethan has an active imagination. We should get going. Thank her." "You again, Mr. Senna?" As they started to leave, Marco found himself calling after them. "Wait, please, how do you know that name?" Sarah hesitated, then turned back. "It's a common name. Ethan reads a lot of books, picks up names he likes." But Marco could see the lie in her eyes. Something wasn't right. "Let me help you to your car," he offered, gathering some of their bags. Outside in the parking lot, they approached an old Honda Civic with a faded bumper sticker from East Side Medical Center. Sarah nervously fumbled with her keys as Marco loaded the groceries into the trunk. "You work at East Side?" he asked, remembering that Elisa had volunteered there occasionally. "I'm a nurse there, yes," Sarah replied, helping Ethan into the passenger seat and folding his wheelchair. Marco handed Sarah his business card before she could retreat into the driver's seat. "If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call. Any friend of Elisa's would be someone I'd want to help." Sarah's face paled. "I never said I knew your wife, Mr. Senna." "You didn't have to." Marco held her gaze. "Please, if there's anything you can tell me about Elisa, I'd like to hear it." After a moment of tense silence, Sarah sighed. "This isn't the place. If you want to talk, I finish my shift at 7 tomorrow evening." With that, she got into her car and drove away, leaving Marco standing in the rain, clutching a receipt for groceries that had suddenly changed the course of his life. That night, Marco couldn't sleep. He paced the halls of his mansion, every room a shrine to his life with Elisa. Their wedding photos, her books still on the shelves, her perfume that he couldn't bear to throw away still sitting on her vanity. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to look directly at the mystery of her passing. The police report had been conclusive, a tragic accident, but he had always sensed there was more to the story. Elisa had been acting strangely in the weeks before her accident. Late-night phone calls she'd take in private, unexplained absences, a distracted air that wasn't like her. When he'd asked, she'd kissed him and promised everything was fine. Then she was gone, and he'd been too consumed by grief to question further. At his desk, Marco opened his laptop and pulled up the file he'd kept but never reviewed, the complete police report, the medical examiner's findings, the insurance investigation. He'd been a coward, afraid of what he might find. But now, with the appearance of Sarah and Ethan Mitchell, something had awakened in him, a need for truth, whatever it might cost. As dawn broke over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Marco made a decision. He would meet Sarah at the hospital. He would learn what connection she had to Elisa, and he would finally face whatever secrets his wife had kept from him. He looked at a photo of Elisa on his desk, her blue eyes seeming to look right through him. "What didn't you tell me?" he whispered, "and why was it worth keeping from me?" The next morning, Marco cancelled all his meetings. His COO, James Reynolds, called immediately. "Max, we have the venture capitalists coming in today. What's going on?" "Something personal has come up, James. I need you to handle it." There was a pause. "Is this about Elisa? Because it's been 3 years, Max. She would want you to move on." Marco gripped the phone tighter. James had been his mentor when he'd started the company, and Elisa's friend long before they'd met. He'd been a rock during the darkest days after her passing. "It's not about moving on, James. It's about finding answers." "Answers to what?" James's voice sharpened. "The accident was investigated thoroughly. You're just reopening old wounds." "Maybe some wounds need to be reopened to heal properly," Marco replied, ending the call before James could respond. Throughout the day, Marco combed through Elisa's personal effects, searching for any clue that might connect her to Sarah Mitchell. In a box of keepsakes, he found a photo he'd never seen before, Elisa with her arm around a younger Sarah, both in scrubs, standing outside East Side Medical Center. On the back was written, "Sarah and Liz, Volunteer Program, 2018. His hands trembled as he stared at the photo. Elisa had volunteered at East Side, but she'd never mentioned Sarah. What else hadn't she mentioned? As the appointed hour approached, Marco drove to East Side Medical Center, his mind racing with questions. He parked and waited near the staff, entrance watching as nurses and doctors streamed out at the end of their shifts. Finally, he spotted Sarah, now in street clothes, her hair loose around her shoulders. She saw him and hesitated before walking over to his car. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I need to know the truth," Marco replied simply. "About Elisa, about you, about Ethan." Sarah looked away, her expression troubled. "The truth isn't always what we want it to be, Mr. Senna. Please call me Marco." She nodded, then glanced around the parking lot nervously. "Not here. Follow me home. Ethan is with my neighbor, but he'll be waiting for us. As Marco followed Sarah's Honda through the winding streets of a modest suburb, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was driving toward a revelation that would change everything he thought he knew about the woman he had loved, and perhaps still did. Sarah's apartment was in a modest complex on the outskirts of Bellevue. Marco parked his Tesla beside her Honda, feeling conspicuously out of place among the economy cars in the lot. As he walked to her front door, he noticed the small garden of potted plants on the narrow balcony and the wind chimes that tinkled in the evening breeze. Sarah opened the door before he could knock. "Please come in," she said, her voice tense. "Mrs. Jenkins just brought Ethan back." She stepped aside, revealing a small but tidy living room where Ethan sat in his wheelchair, a book open on his lap. "Hello again, Mr. Senna," Ethan said, marking his page carefully before closing the book. Up close, Marco could see the boy's features more clearly, the shape of his nose, the curve of his eyebrows. Something about him seemed hauntingly familiar. "Hello, Ethan. What are you reading?" The boy held up a well-worn copy of The Little Prince. "It was my mom's favorite," he said. "My real mom, I mean." Sarah moved quickly to the kitchen. "Would you like some coffee, Marco?" "Yes, thank you," he replied, still watching Ethan, who was watching him just as intently. "You look like the pictures," Ethan said simply. Marco sat down across from him. "What pictures, Ethan?" Before the boy could answer, Sarah returned with a steaming mug. "Ethan, it's time for your exercises and then bed." "But, Mom, we just got company," Ethan protested. "Mr. Senna and I need to talk privately," Sarah said firmly. "You can see him another time." After Ethan had reluctantly wheeled himself down the hallway, Sarah sat down heavily on the sofa. "I don't know where to begin," she admitted. Marco set his coffee aside, untouched. "Begin with Elisa. How did you know her?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We met at Eastside Medical, as you probably guessed. I was a nurse and she was a volunteer in the pediatric ward. We became friends." She paused, her fingers tracing the pattern on the sofa. "Good friends." "And Ethan? Why did he mention her name at the store?" Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "Because she's part of his story too." "What happened to his legs?" Marco asked, noticing the framed photos on the wall, Ethan in a baseball uniform, standing proudly with a bat, a more recent one of him in his wheelchair. "Spinal cord injury from a car accident 2 years ago," Sarah said, her voice catching. "The same accident that took his mother." Marco's mind raced. 2 years ago would have been after Elisa's passing. "I don't understand." Sarah stood and walked to a small desk in the corner of the room. From a drawer, she removed a manila envelope and handed it to Marco. "I think you should see these first." Inside were photographs and letters. The first photo showed Elisa, Sarah, and Ethan as a younger child, all smiling at what appeared to be a birthday party. The next was Elisa holding a much younger Ethan, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, at a beach. Then came a series of letters, all in Elisa's handwriting, addressed to "My dearest Sarah." Marco's hands trembled as he read the first one, dated 5 years ago. "Sarah, I don't know how to explain what's happening between us. Marco and I have been having problems for months, and during our separation you became so much more than a friend to me. But now he wants to reconcile and I'm torn. I love you, but I made vows to him. Please try to understand." The room seemed to tilt as the implications of the letter hit him. Marco looked up at Sarah, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. "You and Elisa were—" "We were in love," Sarah confirmed quietly, "during the time you were separated, before your reconciliation." Marco remembered that difficult period. 6 years ago, he and Elisa had been having trouble conceiving, and the stress had driven them apart for nearly 8 months. When they reconciled, they had agreed to start fresh, to put the past behind them. "But Ethan," Marco said, his voice hoarse, "you said he lost his mother." Sarah took back the envelope and pulled out another document, a birth certificate. "Ethan was born 10 years ago. His biological mother's name is listed as Elisa Mitchell." Marco stared at the certificate, his world collapsing around him. Elisa is Ethan's mother. But how? "We were trying for a child for years without success." She found out she was pregnant shortly after your separation began, Sarah explained. She didn't know how to tell you, especially once you reconciled, so she made a choice. She asked me to raise him as my own. The revelation hit Marco like a physical blow. Elisa had been pregnant with their child and had chosen to give the baby to Sarah without ever telling him. Why wouldn't she tell me? I would have welcomed a child, even under those circumstances. Sarah looked down. The truth is, Ethan isn't your biological child, Marco. The silence that followed was deafening. Marco stood up, needing to move, to process. Whose child is he then? She never told me, Sarah said. She only said that it happened during your separation and that you could never. No, Elisa was protecting someone, though I never knew who or why. Marco walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Elisa had kept an entire life hidden from him, a lover, a child, secrets he could scarcely comprehend. And the accident that injured Ethan? Sarah's voice grew softer. We were driving back from visiting Elisa's grave. A black SUV ran us off the road. The police called it a hit and run, but I always felt it was deliberate. Ethan nearly died, his spine was damaged, and he lost the use of his legs. Marco turned back to her, his business instincts cutting through his emotional turmoil. You said someone ran you off the road. Do you think it's connected to Elisa's accident? I never allowed myself to think that, Sarah admitted. But after what happened, I started to wonder. Does Ethan know that Elisa was his biological mother? Sarah nodded. I told him when he was 8. Elisa and I had agreed that when he was old enough to understand, he should know the truth. He has her photos. He knows stories about her. In many ways, he feels like he has 2 mothers. A new thought occurred to Marco. Does he know about me? He knows Elisa was married to someone named Marco Senna. I never showed him pictures, but he's a curious boy. He may have looked you up online after learning your name. From down the hall came the sound of Ethan calling for Sarah. She excused herself, leaving Marco alone with his thoughts and the evidence of Elisa's double life. He picked up another letter, this one dated just weeks before Elisa's accident. Sarah, I'm frightened. I think Jay knows about Ethan. He's been asking questions, watching me. I can't risk him finding out the truth. If anything happens to me, take the documents I left in the safe deposit box and disappear. Marco must never know. It would destroy everything he's built. Promise me you'll keep our son safe. The letter ended there with no signature, as if Elisa had been interrupted while writing it. Jay. Who was Jay? Someone who had known about Ethan. Someone Elisa had feared. Someone who might have had a reason to cause her accident. Sarah returned to find Marco holding the letter, his face pale. What does this mean? He asked. Who is Jay? I don't know, Sarah replied. After her accident, I was too afraid to look into it. I took Ethan and moved to a different neighborhood, changed our routines. But I never found the safe deposit box she mentioned. And now? Marco asked. Why did you agree to tell me all this now? Sarah sat down again, closer to him this time. Because when I saw you at the grocery store, I realized something. Ethan deserves to know where he comes from. And you deserve to know about Elisa's son, even if he isn't yours biologically. There's more to it than that, Marco pressed. You're scared of something, or someone. Sarah hesitated, then reached for her phone. She pulled up a photo and handed it to Marco. It showed a black SUV parked across the street from her apartment. This same car has been following us for weeks. I thought I was being paranoid until last Tuesday, when a man approached Ethan at his physical therapy session, claiming to be an old friend of his mother's. Marco studied the photo, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Did you get a license plate? No, it's always parked in a way that hides the plate. The man at the therapy center gave Ethan a business card, but I took it away from him. She rummaged through her purse and produced a plain white card with a single name and phone number. James Reynolds. Marco felt as if he'd been doused in ice water. James Reynolds, his COO, his mentor, Elisa's old friend, the J from her letter. I know that name changed your expression, Sarah said. Who is he? My second-in-command at Senna Innovations. He's been with the company since the beginning. He was Elisa's friend before I even met her. Marco's mind was racing. What would he want with Ethan? Sarah's eyes widened. Elisa was terrified that someone would find out about Ethan. What if it was because of who his biological father is? The implication hung in the air between them. Could James Reynolds be Ethan's biological father? Had Elisa and his trusted colleague betrayed him together? Or was there something even darker at play? I need to find that safe deposit box, Marco said decisively, and I need to keep you and Ethan safe while I do. What are you suggesting? Come stay at my house in Medina. It's secure, gated, with a top-of-the-line security system. No one will find you there. Sarah looked doubtful. I can't just uproot Ethan. He has therapy and I have work. I can arrange for private therapy sessions and you can take a leave of absence. Please, Sarah, if James is involved in Elisa's accident, and if he tried to harm you and Ethan, then none of us are safe until we know why. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan wheeled himself back into the living room. I heard you talking about moving to your house, he said to Marco. Can we go? I'm tired of being scared all the time. Sarah looked at her son in surprise. You knew we were being followed? Ethan nodded solemnly. The man who gave me the card also said something else. He said that I looked just like my father, and that it was only a matter of time before everyone knew. Marco and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. What else did he say, Ethan? Marco asked gently. He asked if I knew about Senna Innovations and said that someday it might all be mine. But then Mom came and he left quickly. Ethan's intelligent eyes moved between the adults. Is Mr. Reynolds my father? No, honey, Sarah said quickly. We don't know who your biological father is. Elisa didn't tell us. But Marco wasn't so sure anymore. He pulled out his phone and brought up a photo of James Reynolds, showing it to Ethan. Is this the man who spoke to you? Ethan studied the photo and shook his head. No, that's not him. Relief washed over Marco, followed immediately by confusion. If not James, then who had approached Ethan? And why use James's name? Pack some essentials, Marco decided. We're leaving tonight. I'll have security sweep my house and arrange for a private car. As Sarah hurried to gather their belongings, Marco knelt beside Ethan's wheelchair. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe, he promised. And to find out the truth about your mother. Ethan regarded him solemnly. Which one? Both of them, Marco answered. And about you, too. The boy nodded, seemingly satisfied. As Marco helped him gather his books and games, Ethan said quietly, I have dreams about my real mom sometimes. She's trying to tell me something important, but I can never hear what it is. Do you think she's trying to help us from heaven? Marco's throat tightened with emotion. I think Elisa would move heaven and earth to protect you, Ethan, and so will I. As they prepared to leave the apartment, Marco couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He helped Sarah load their bags into his car, scanning the darkened parking lot for any sign of the black SUV. We'll take the long way, he said as they pulled out, just to be safe. In the rearview mirror, he saw Ethan looking back at the only home he'd known, clutching a photo album to his chest. The boy caught Marco's eye in the mirror and offered a small, brave smile. Marco smiled back, even as his mind churned with questions. Who had really fathered Elisa's child? What secret had she died to protect? And most disturbing of all, was James Reynolds, his trusted friend and colleague, somehow behind it all. As they drove through the night, toward Medina, Marco made a silent vow. He would find the answers no matter where they led. He owed it to Elisa, to Ethan, and to the truth that had been buried for far too long. The security lights illuminated Marco's sprawling estate as they drove through the wrought iron gates. Sarah gasped audibly at the sight of the mansion nestled among ancient cedars, its stone facade glowing warmly against the night sky. You live here alone? She asked as Marco helped Ethan from the car into his wheelchair. Since Elisa, he replied simply. He'd never noticed how his voice always dropped when he said her name, as if it were a prayer. It's too big for one person, but I never could bring myself to sell it. Ethan's eyes were wide with wonder as they entered the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. "This is like a castle," he breathed. Despite the tension of the night, Marco smiled. "There's an elevator to the upper floors installed when Elisa's mother visited with her arthritis, and the grounds have paved paths that should be manageable with your wheelchair." Mrs. Winters, Marco's housekeeper, appeared from the kitchen, her surprise at the unexpected guests barely concealed behind her professional demeanor. "Mr. Senna, I wasn't expecting you back tonight. Shall I prepare rooms for your guests?" "Yes, please." "The blue suite for Ms. Mitchell and the connected room for her son. Also, we'll need extra security protocols in place. No visitors without my direct approval." As Mrs. Winters bustled off to prepare the rooms, Marco turned to Sarah. "You'll be safe here. The security system is state-of-the-art, and I have a trusted team monitoring the property." Sarah nodded, though her eyes betrayed her unease. "What now?" "We're here, but we're no closer to understanding what Elisa was hiding or why someone might be after Ethan." "First we rest," Marco said, aware of Ethan's drooping eyelids despite the boy's efforts to stay alert. "Tomorrow, we start looking for answers, beginning with that safe deposit box." Later, after Sarah and Ethan had settled into their rooms, Marco retreated to his study, the one room in the house that still felt truly his. He poured himself a glass of bourbon and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk, removing a leather-bound journal. It had been Elisa's, one of the few personal items recovered from her wrecked car. He'd been too devastated to read it after her passing, afraid of the grief it would unleash. Now he opened it with trembling hands, knowing it might contain clues to the mysteries surrounding her. The early entries were mundane: appointments, reminders, brief notes about her day. Then about 6 years ago, the tone changed. "May 15th told Em I need space. Can't bear to see the hope in his eyes each month when I know I can never give him the child he wants. My secret shame. Sarah understands in a way he never could." July 3rd, medical conference in San Diego with Jay. "He knows something is wrong, too perceptive for his own good." August 9th, the impossible has happened. Pregnant. "How can I tell anyone? What will this mean for all of us?" October 17th, Sarah has offered a solution. "It would mean giving up my child, but keeping everyone safe." Is it selfish to consider it? December 24th, reconciliation with M. "He's so happy to have me back, talks of trying again for a baby. If he only knew. The guilt is unbearable." The entries grew more sporadic after that, but one stood out, dated just a month before her accident. March 3rd, Jay suspects. "Confronted me today about the trust changes, said I'm jeopardizing everything we've worked for. Threatened to tell M everything if I don't reconsider. What choice do I have now?" Marco closed the journal, his mind reeling. Trust changes? What? Had Elisa done that had so alarmed James? And why would changes to their financial arrangements be connected to Ethan? He moved to his computer and accessed his private server, searching for documents related to the Senna Trust. It took hours of digging through encrypted files, but eventually he found what he was looking for: an amendment to the trust filed 3 years ago, just weeks before Elisa's accident. The amendment designated 30% of Senna Innovations, shares to be held in trust for a minor beneficiary, to be named upon my passing or upon reaching the age of 21. The trustee named was Sarah Mitchell, with Elisa's brother Daniel as executor. Marco sat back, stunned. Elisa had diverted a significant portion of what would have been his inheritance to a child he hadn't known existed. But why the secrecy? Even if Ethan wasn't his biological child, Marco would never have begrudged Elisa's son his birthright, unless there was more to it, unless the identity of Ethan's father was the real secret Elisa had died protecting. Dawn was breaking when Marco finally went to bed, his mind too full for sleep. He woke a few hours later to the sound of laughter, a sound his house hadn't heard in years. Following it to the kitchen, he found Ethan at the table with Mrs. Winters, who was showing him how to fold napkins into swans. "Mr. Senna," Ethan greeted him brightly. Mrs. Winters makes pancakes shaped like animals. Best breakfast in Seattle, Marco agreed, accepting a cup of coffee from his housekeeper with a grateful nod. Where's your mother? Still sleeping. She works night shifts sometimes, so she gets really tired. Marco sat down beside the boy, struck again by the familiar features that he couldn't quite place. Ethan, can I ask you something? Do you remember much about Elisa, your birth mother? Ethan's hands stilled on the napkin. I remember her laugh and how she smelled like vanilla. She used to visit us every Sunday and we'd go to the park or the aquarium. She called me her little prince. Like the book you were reading, Marco realized. Ethan nodded. She gave it to me. Said it was about finding what's important. He hesitated. She stopped coming around before the accident. Mom said she was busy, but I think something was wrong. She seemed scared. Marco's heart ached for the boy, who had lost so much. I wish I had known about you back then. We could have been friends. We can be friends now, Ethan said simply. Mom says you're trying to help us, that you might know why that man was asking questions about me. Before Marco could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her hair damp from a shower, wearing clothes Mrs. Winters must have provided, jeans and a simple blouse that somehow made her look even more vulnerable. Good morning, she said, her eyes taking in the domestic scene with surprise. Sorry I slept so late. You needed it, Marco assured her. Mrs. Winters has made enough breakfast for an army. After they'd eaten, Marco outlined his plans for the day. I need to go to the bank and see if I can locate Elisa's safe deposit box. Sarah, you mentioned she told you about it in a letter, but did she ever specify which bank? Sarah shook her head. No, but she banked at First Northwest. That would be my guess. I'll start there. He hesitated. I also found something last night. Elisa amended our trust shortly before her accident. She left a significant portion of Senna Innovations to a minor beneficiary, presumably Ethan, with you as trustee. Sarah's shock appeared genuine. She never told me about any trust amendment. I would have known if I'd been named a trustee. The amendment was never filed with the main trust documents. It was in a separate encrypted file. I'm guessing she was keeping it secret until she figured out how to tell me about Ethan. Or until she felt it was safe to, Sarah added. Marco nodded, the implications settling heavily between them. Either way, it gives us a motive. If someone at Senna Innovations discovered that Elisa was planning to divert shares to a previously unknown heir, they might have wanted to stop her, Sarah finished, her face paling. And now they might be after Ethan because they've discovered who he is. Marco's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from James Reynolds. Where are you? Board is asking questions. Need to talk ASAP. I need to go into the office, Marco decided, showing Sarah the message. Act normal. See if I can pick up on anything suspicious. James has no idea I know about the trust amendment or about Ethan. Sarah looked worried. Is that safe if he's involved? It's the best way to get information without tipping our hand. Besides, I need to access company records that might help us understand what Elisa discovered. He turned to Ethan. Would you mind hanging out here with your mum and Mrs. Winters today? I promise we can explore the grounds when I get back. Ethan looked disappointed, but nodded bravely. Mum and I will be fine. We're good at waiting. The K. Simple statement, laden with the weight of their precarious existence over the past years, struck Marco to the core. Not anymore, he promised. You don't have to just wait and hope anymore. We're going to fix this together. As Marco drove to Senna Innovations headquarters, his mind raced with new theories and questions. He'd instructed his head of security to discreetly monitor the property in his absence and to alert him to any unusual activity. The familiar glass and steel building loomed ahead, its logo, a stylized S that Elisa had designed, gleaming in the morning sun. For the first time, Marco wondered if the company he'd built with such dedication had somehow played a role in his wife's passing. In the executive parking garage, he noticed James's car already in its reserved spot. Taking a deep breath, Marco prepared himself to face the man who might have betrayed him in the worst possible way. The executive floor was buzzing with activity as Marco stepped off the elevator. His assistant Diana hurried over with a look of relief. "Mr. Senna, the board has been calling all morning, and Mr. Reynolds has been looking for you." "I'll handle it," Marco assured her, striding toward his office with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Hold my calls for the next hour except for Sarah Mitchell if she phones." "Sarah Mitchell?" Diana repeated, making a note. "Is she a new client?" "An old friend of Elisa's," Marco replied, watching her reaction carefully, but Diana merely nodded and returned to her desk. Inside his office, Marco had barely settled behind his desk when James Reynolds appeared at the door, his usual composed demeanor slightly ruffled. "Max, where have you been?" "The venture capital meeting was a disaster without you," James said, closing the door behind him, "and now the board is questioning your commitment." Marco studied the man who had been his mentor and friend for over 15 years. James was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and the trim build of someone who prioritized fitness. His steel-gray eyes, usually sharp with intelligence, now showed concern. Or was it something else? "I had a personal matter to attend to," Marco replied evenly. "Something related to Elisa." He watched James carefully, noting the slight tensing of his shoulders at the mention of Elisa's name. "Elisa? It's been 3 years, Max. What could possibly have come up now?" "I met someone who knew her," Marco said, deliberately vague. "It's made me reconsider certain aspects of her accident." James sat down, his expression a mixture of concern and wariness. "What are you implying? The police investigation was thorough. It was a tragic accident, nothing more." "Was it?" Marco leaned forward. "Did you know Elisa amended our trust shortly before she died? She was planning to allocate a significant portion of Senna Innovation shares to an unnamed beneficiary." For a split second, James's composure slipped, revealing a flash of what might have been fear or anger. But he recovered quickly. "I knew nothing about any amendment. As CFO, I should have been informed of any changes to the company's ownership structure." "That's what puzzles me," Marco pressed. "Elisa kept it secret, even from me, which makes me wonder what else she might have been hiding, and from whom." James stood abruptly. "I don't like what you're insinuating, Max. Elisa and I were friends long before you came into the picture, but I would never have done anything to harm her or you." "I never suggested you would," Marco replied mildly, though his heart was racing. "But I find it interesting that you jumped to that conclusion." James's expression hardened. "You're under stress, clearly. Take some time off if you need it. But don't start seeing conspiracies where there are none. It's unhealthy." He moved toward the door. "By the way, Daniel called yesterday, said he's been trying to reach you." Marco stiffened at the mention of Elisa's brother. "Daniel, what did he want?" "Didn't say, just that it was urgent." James paused at the door. "If you do decide to dig into the past, Max, be careful. Sometimes the truth is more painful than not knowing." After James left, Marco sat motionless, replaying the conversation in his mind. James had definitely reacted to the mention of the trust amendment, but was it surprise or something more sinister? He picked up his phone and dialed Daniel Mitchell, Elisa's only sibling. The brothers-in-law had never been close, and after Elisa's passing, they drifted further apart. Daniel had moved to Portland, where he worked as an architect. "Marco," Daniel's voice was guarded when he answered, "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." "I've been dealing with some unexpected developments," Marco replied. "James mentioned you called, said it was urgent." There was a pause. "Not over the phone. I need to see you in person." Marco's instincts were on high alert. "Is this about Elisa?" Another pause. "Yes, and about her son." Marco's grip tightened. "On the phone. You know about Ethan." "So you found him," Daniel said, sounding relieved. "Thank God. Is he safe? Is Sarah with him?" "They're both safe," Marco confirmed, his mind racing. "How long have you known about them?" "Since the beginning. I was there when Ethan was born. Elisa made me promise never to tell you, said it would complicate things." Daniel's voice grew strained. "But that was before she started suspecting that something was wrong at Senna Innovations, before she changed her will and the trust." "What did she suspect, Daniel? What was she afraid of?" Not over the phone, Daniel repeated firmly. I'm driving. Up to Seattle tomorrow. Meet me at the Lakeside coffee shop at noon, and Marco, don't tell anyone, especially not James Reynolds. The call ended, leaving Marco with more questions than answers. He accessed his computer, searching through company records for anything unusual around the time of Elisa's accident. Financial reports, board meeting minutes, emails, nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first glance. Then he remembered Elisa's reference to trust changes in her journal. He dug deeper into the company's financial history and discovered something disturbing. 3 months before Elisa's accident, a series of transactions had been initiated, transferring small amounts of company funds to an offshore account. The transactions were expertly hidden within legitimate business expenses, but once Marco knew what to look for, the pattern was clear. Even more troubling was the authorization signature on the transfers, J. Reynolds and E. Senna. Had Elisa discovered financial irregularities within the company? Had she confronted James about them, only to be silenced permanently? Or was she somehow complicit? Marco's head was spinning as he left the office, telling Diana he'd be working from home for the rest of the day. As he drove back to Medina, he called the First Northwest Bank and scheduled an appointment with the manager for the following morning. If Elisa had left something in a safe deposit box, he was determined to find it. Back at the mansion, he found Sarah and Ethan in the garden, Mrs. Winters helping the boy navigate his wheelchair along the paved paths. Seeing them together in the sunlight, Marco was struck by how much Ethan resembled Elisa, the same thoughtful gaze, the same way of tilting his head when curious. "How did it go?" Sarah asked when they were alone in the kitchen. Marco told her about his conversation with James and the call from Daniel. "James definitely reacted when I mentioned the trust amendment, and Daniel knows about you and Ethan. He says Elisa was worried about something happening at Senna Innovations." Sarah frowned. "Elisa never mentioned any problems at your company to me, but she was becoming more secretive in those last few months." She hesitated. "There's something else I should tell you. The night before her accident, Elisa came to see us. She seemed terrified, said she'd made a terrible mistake and needed to fix it. She left a package with me for safekeeping, made me promise to hide it well." Marco stared at her. "What was in it?" "I don't know. After the accident, I was too afraid to look. I hid it like," she asked, "in the storage unit where I keep my late parents' things." "We need to get that package," Marco said urgently. It could be what she was referring to in her letter, the proof she wanted to keep safe. Sarah nodded. "I'll go first thing tomorrow, but we need to be careful. If someone followed us here, seek you." "I'll have my security team escort you," Marco assured her. "In the meantime, I want to know more about Ethan, not just about his connection to Elisa, but about him as a person." Sarah's expression softened. "He's remarkable, brilliant at math, loves science and books. Before the accident, he played baseball, was quite good at it. The doctors say he might walk again someday with the right treatment and therapy." "I'd like to help with that," Marco said. "Regardless of who his biological father is, he's Elisa's son. That makes him family." Sarah touched his arm, her eyes warm with gratitude. "Thank you for all of this. I've been carrying this burden alone for so long, afraid to trust anyone." "Not anymore," Marco promised. "Whatever secrets Elisa was keeping, whatever danger you and Ethan are in, we'll face it together." That night, as the house settled into silence, Marco found himself drawn to the bedroom that had once been Elisa's studio. He'd kept it locked since her passing, unable to face the memories it contained. Now, he turned the key and stepped inside. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Easel by the window, paints and brushes meticulously arranged, half-finished canvases stacked against the wall. Elisa had been a talented amateur artist, finding solace in painting landscapes and abstract compositions. Marco moved through the space, touching her things gently, feeling closer to her than he had in years. On her desk lay her old sketchbook. He opened it, finding page after page of familiar scenes: their garden, the view from the office, the Seattle skyline at sunset. Then he turned to the last drawing, dated just days before her accident. It showed a tree with spreading branches, and beneath it, 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child in what appeared to be a wheelchair. The faces weren't detailed, but the implication was clear. Elisa had envisioned a future where Marco, Sarah, and Ethan were together. Had she been planning to tell him the truth? To bring her 2 separate lives together into one family? If so, what had stopped her? As Marco closed the sketchbook, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Marco Senna," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Senna." The voice was distorted, deliberately disguised. "You're asking dangerous questions. Stop now if you value the lives of Sarah Mitchell and the boy." Marco's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows the truth about Elisa and her son. Someone who knows what she was hiding. Back off now, or history will repeat itself." The call ended, leaving Marco standing in Elisa's studio, the threat hanging in the air around him. They were being watched. The enemy knew they were at his house, knew about his investigation. His first instinct was to call the police, but what could he tell them? He had no proof of any crime, only suspicions and a vague threat. No, he needed to handle this himself, to protect Sarah and Ethan while uncovering the truth Elisa had died for. Tomorrow, he would retrieve the package Sarah had hidden and meet with Daniel. Between the two, he hoped to find the answers he needed. But tonight, he would strengthen the security around his property and keep watch over the family Elisa had entrusted to him, the family she had hoped would someday be his as well. The morning dawned grey and misty, typical Seattle weather that matched Marco's somber mood. He'd barely slept, taking turns with his security team to patrol the property, jumping at every shadow and sound. Sarah emerged from the guest suite early, her face drawn with worry. Ethan had nightmares, she confided, as Marco handed her a cup of coffee. He kept saying someone was watching him through the window, but when I checked, there was nothing there. "I've doubled the security," Marco assured her. "No one can get onto the property without us knowing." They decided that Sarah would retrieve the package from her storage unit while Marco met with Daniel. Both would have security escorts, and they would reconvene at the mansion afterward. As Sarah prepared to leave, Ethan wheeled himself into the kitchen, his young face serious. "Be careful, Mum," he said, with a maturity that broke Marco's heart. "No child should have to fear for his parents' safety. I will, honey. And Mr. Senna's security guard, Mr. Thompson, will be with me the key. Whole time." She knelt beside his wheelchair. "You stay with Mrs. Winters and do your lessons. I'll be back before you know it." After Sarah left, Marco found himself alone with Ethan. The boy was working on math problems that seemed far advanced for his age. "You like numbers, huh?" Marco asked, sitting down beside him. Ethan nodded without looking up. "Mum says I get that from my real mum. She was good with numbers too, right?" "She was," Marco confirmed, remembering how Elisa had managed their personal finances with meticulous precision. She had an incredible mind for patterns and details. Ethan finally looked up. "Did you know she used to send me coded messages? She said it was our special game." Marco's interest sharpened. "What kind of codes?" "Simple ones at first, substituting numbers for letters. Then more complicated ones. She said, if I ever received a message I couldn't decode, I should keep it safe until I was older, or until I met someone who could help me." Ethan hesitated. "After she died, I got a letter in the mail. It was full of numbers, but I couldn't figure out the pattern. I kept it hidden like she said." Marco's pulse quickened. "Do you still have this letter, Ethan?" The boy nodded. "It's in my backpack. I always keep it with me." Minutes later, Marco was staring at a sheet of paper covered in seemingly random sequences of numbers. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like meaningless scribbles, but Marco recognized it immediately, a sophisticated encryption algorithm that Elisa had helped develop for Senna Innovations. "Ethan, I think I know how to decode this. Your mother and I created this encryption system together years ago." His fingers trembled slightly as he entered the sequences into his phone's decryption app, a proprietary tool only available to Senna executives. The decoded message appeared on the screen. "Ethan, if you're reading this, something has happened. To me." The key to understanding lies in the name of your father. James Reynolds discovered what I was hiding, not just you, but evidence of his crimes. The proof is in the Cayman account data and the trust amendment. D knows the whole truth. Trust Marco. He will protect you. I'm sorry I kept you a secret from him. I thought I was protecting you both, but I was wrong. Remember that I love you always. Mom. Marco stared at the message, his mind racing. James Reynolds' crimes. The Cayman account. That must be the offshore account he'd discovered yesterday. But the most baffling part was the reference to Ethan's father. The key to understanding lies in the name of your father. What could that mean? Did you decode it? Ethan asked eagerly. Marco nodded, unsure how much to share with the boy. Your mother left you a message saying how much she loved you, he said, which was true enough. And that she wanted me to protect you. Ethan's eyes filled with solemn understanding. Because of the bad man, right? The one who hurt her. Before Marco could respond, his phone rang. It was his head of security. Mr. Senna, there's been an incident. Mr. Mitchell never showed up at the coffee shop. We canvassed the area and found his car abandoned 2 blocks away. No sign of him. Marco's stomach dropped. Any signs of a struggle? None. Visible. But we've alerted local police. They're checking traffic cameras now. Keep me posted, Marco ordered, ending the call with a growing sense of dread. He dialed Sarah immediately. Sarah, where are you? At the storage unit with Mr. Thompson. We've got the package Elisa left. We're heading back now. Change of plans, Daniel's missing. I don't think it's safe for you to come back here yet. Meet me at the Senna Innovations downtown office instead. Use the private entrance in the underground garage. Thompson knows the way. What about Ethan? Marco looked at the boy, who was watching him with alarmed eyes. He's safer here with the security team than on the move. I'll have them lock down the estate. No one in or out until we return. After ensuring that the security protocols were in place and reassuring Ethan that they would return soon, Marco left for his downtown office. The drive through Seattle's rain-slicked streets seemed interminably long, his mind churning with theories and fears. Daniel missing. The threatening phone call. The references to James Reynolds in Elisa's encrypted message. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more disturbing than Marco had imagined. At Senna Innovations, Marco used his private elevator to access the executive floor, which was mostly empty on a Saturday. He had just stepped into his office when his phone rang again. It was Thompson. Sir, we've been compromised. A black SUV forced us off the road near Mercer Street. Ms. Mitchell is injured but conscious. I've called an ambulance. Where's the package? Secure, sir, I have it. Stay. With her, I'm on my way. Marco raced back to his car, but as he reached for the door handle, he felt the cold press of metal against his back. Not so fast, Max. James Reynolds' voice was calm, almost conversational. Let's continue this discussion. In your office, shall we? With the gun at his back, Marco had no choice but to return to the building. In the elevator, James relieved him of his phone and keys. Why, James? Marco asked as they re-entered his office. What could possibly be worth all this? James gestured for Marco to sit. Isn't it obvious? Money, power, the things men have always killed for. He settled into a chair across from Marco, the gun never wavering. You were always too idealistic, Max. You never understood the real game. And what game is that? Corporate warfare. Senna Innovations is sitting on patents worth billions. The neural interface technology alone could revolutionize a dozen industries. But you've been too cautious, too ethical, refusing military contracts, insisting on humanitarian applications. James's disgust was evident. Do you have any idea how much money we've left on the table? Marco studied the man he'd trusted for so many years. So you've been embezzling, selling our tech on the side. That's what Elisa discovered. James smiled thinly. She was always too clever for her own good. Found the offshore accounts, traced them back to me. She was going to expose everything. So, you sabotaged her car. Marco's voice was ice. Made it look like an accident. I gave her a chance to keep quiet. For your sake, I told her. But she was stubborn, said she couldn't live with the knowledge that our technology was being weaponized against our own intelligence policy. James shook his head. Such a waste. Marco's hands clenched into fists beneath the desk. And Daniel? What have you done with him? Daniel's been helping me for years. He's the architect who designed our secure server facility in Portland. He has access codes, blueprints, everything we needed to cover our tracks. But lately he's been having second thoughts, talking about coming clean. So you eliminated him too? Marco felt sick. James shrugged. Let's just say he's no longer a concern. And Sarah, Ethan, they've done nothing to you. Sarah knows. Too much. And the boy... James's eyes narrowed. Elisa's son is a complication I can't afford. Because of the trust amendment, Marco guessed. If Ethan is revealed as Elisa's son, he inherits a significant portion of Senna Innovations. 30%, James confirmed. Enough to block any major decision I might make as the new CEO after your unfortunate accident today. Marco's mind was racing. He needed to keep James talking while he figured out a way to alert security. There's one thing I still don't understand. Who is Ethan's father? The encrypted message Elisa left for him said the key to understanding everything lies in his father's name. Something flickered in James's eyes. She told you about the message? Not Elisa. Ethan had it. We decoded it together. Marco watched. James carefully. The boy deserves to know his heritage, James. Before you kill us all, at least give him that. James laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. You really haven't figured it out, have you? Look at the boy, Max. Really look at him. The shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. Who does he remind you of? The realization hit Marco like a physical blow. The familiar features he'd noticed but couldn't place. The mathematical aptitude. Elisa's fear and secrecy. He's your son, Marco whispered. You and Elisa. One night. That's all it was, James said dismissively. During your separation, she was vulnerable, upset about not being able to give you children. I comforted her. His smile was cruel. Imagine my surprise when she told me she was pregnant. She swore me to secrecy, said she'd never tell you or anyone else. But you knew about Sarah, about the arrangement Elisa made. I had her followed occasionally. I knew she was visiting the boy. It didn't matter to me until she discovered what I was doing with the company. Then suddenly, my son became her leverage. She threatened to reveal his paternity if I didn't. Stop the illegal tech sales. Marco struggled to process this final betrayal. Elisa and James, a child together. But something still didn't make sense. If you're Ethan's father, why would his name be the key to understanding? Your name isn't a secret. James frowned. What are you talking about? The encrypted message said, the key to understanding lies in the name of your father. Marco watched comprehension dawn on James's face, followed by alarm. She knew, James whispered. All along, she knew. A commotion in the outer office interrupted them. The door burst open to reveal Sarah, her arm in a makeshift sling accompanied by Thompson and 2 police. Officers! Marco, she cried, her eyes widening at the sight of the gun. James spun, aiming at Sarah, but Thompson was faster. A single shot rang out, and James crumpled to the ground, the gun clattering from his hand. Hours later, Marco, Sarah, and Ethan sat in the safety of the mansion's library. Daniel had been found, bound but unharmed, in the trunk of his car. James was in custody, under guard in the hospital, where doctors treated his non-life-threatening wound. I still don't understand. About the message, Sarah said. What did Elisa mean about Ethan's father's name being the key? Marco looked at the contents of the package Sarah had retrieved from storage, a USB drive and a DNA test report. She wasn't referring to James. The DNA test proves it. James isn't Ethan's biological father. Ethan, who had been quiet since their return, looked up sharply. Then who is? Marco handed the boy the DNA report. I am, Sarah gasped. But how? Elisa told me. She lied to protect us all, Marco explained gently. The DNA test is dated 6 years ago, right after Ethan was conceived. Elisa must have run it secretly, confirming that I was the father, not James. But why would she hide that from you, from everyone? Sarah asked, bewildered. Because of what she discovered on this USB drive, Marco said, holding up the small device. Financial records proving that James was selling our classified technology to foreign entities. If he knew that Ethan was my biological son, he might have tried to use him as leverage against me, or worse. Ethan was studying the DNA report with intense concentration. So you're really my dad, not Mr. Reynolds? Yes, Ethan, I'm your father. Marco's voice broke with emotion. Your mother and I were separated briefly, but we found our way back to each other. She must have discovered she was pregnant during that time. For reasons I'm still piecing together, she chose to keep you a secret, to protect you from the danger she sensed around James. She asked me to raise him, Sarah added softly, said it was the only way to keep him safe. Marco nodded. The name of your father was the encryption key she used on the financial records. My full legal name, Marco Edward Senna, was the password protecting the evidence against James. She encrypted it, knowing that someday when Ethan learned who his real father was, the truth about James's crimes would be revealed as well. Ethan wheeled himself closer to Marco. What happens now? Marco glanced at Sarah, then back at his son. That's up to you and your mom, but I'd like very much for both of you to stay here, to become a family. The family Elisa wanted us to be. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Is that really what you want after everything that's happened? Elisa loved both of you, Marco said simply, and I'm beginning to see why. She trusted you with our son, Sarah. Now I'm trusting you with my heart, if you'll have it. Ethan looked between the two adults, a slow smile spreading across his face. I think that's what Mum would have wanted. Both my mums. As evening fell, Marco stood at the window of Elisa's studio, watching Sarah and Ethan in the garden below. The rain had stopped, and the setting sun cast a golden glow over the property. In his hand, he held Elisa's sketchbook, open to the drawing of the 3 figures beneath the tree, the family she had envisioned, but never lived to see. You were right all along, he whispered to her memory. The truth was worth fighting for. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. James would stand trial. Senna Innovations would need rebuilding. Ethan would need time to adjust to his new reality, his new father. And Marco and Sarah would need to find their way to each other, to build something new from the ashes of so much deception and loss. But for the first time in 3 years, Marco felt truly alive. The emptiness that had consumed him since Elisa's passing was beginning to fill with something new, not a replacement for what he'd lost, but a continuation of it. A second chance at the life Elisa had wanted for them all. As if sensing his thoughts, Sarah looked up from the garden and gave a small wave. Beside her, Ethan's face was alight with excitement as he pointed out something in the flower bed. Marco waved back, his heart full. Elisa's final gift to him hadn't been the evidence against James, or even the knowledge that he had a son. It had been this moment, this possibility of a future filled with love and purpose. A family forged from tragedy but stronger for it, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. As the seasons changed in Seattle, the Senna mansion gradually transformed from a mausoleum of memories into a vibrant home. Ethan's therapy was progressing well, with specialists suggesting he might take his first steps within the year. Sarah had taken a leave of absence from nursing to focus on helping Ethan adjust and to navigate her evolving relationship with Marco. The trial of James Reynolds had dominated headlines for weeks. The evidence Elisa had gathered, meticulously documented financial records showing years of embezzlement and illegal technology sales, had been irrefutable. James was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, his reputation and legacy destroyed by his own greed. Senna Innovations, under Marco's renewed leadership, had weathered the storm. With a commitment to transparency and ethical business practices, the company had emerged stronger. Its groundbreaking technology, now properly directed toward humanitarian efforts around the globe. One crisp autumn morning, Marco stood beside Ethan's wheelchair at Elisa's grave. It was the first time he'd brought the boy here, wanting to wait until Ethan felt ready. Sarah stood a respectful distance away, giving them privacy for this moment. "I talk to her sometimes," Ethan confided, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers against the headstone. "In my dreams. She seems happy now." Marco rested his hand on his son's shoulder. "I think she is. She'd be proud of you, Ethan, of your courage and your heart." "And of you too," Ethan said with the simple wisdom of a child, "for finding the truth, for keeping us safe." As they made their way back to where Sarah waited, Marco felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. The shadow of Elisa's passing would always be with them, but it no longer defined them. Instead, her love had become the foundation upon which they were building something new, a family bound not by secrets, but by truth. Sarah smiled as they approached, the autumn sunlight catching in her hair. Marco took her hand, and together, the three of them walked toward the future that Elisa had always hoped they would find. Dear listeners, we hope that Marco, Sarah, and Ethan's journey through darkness into light has touched your hearts. The path to healing is rarely straight, and sometimes the truth we seek is more complex than we imagined. Yet, as this family discovered, it's worth fighting for. For more emotionally resonant stories that explore the depths of human connection and resilience, we've created a special playlist just for you. You'll find it by clicking to your left. If this tale of redemption and second chances moved you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that delve into life's complexities and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most challenging circumstances. What secrets would you be willing to uncover for those you love? What truths might be worth the risk? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until our next story, remember that sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another, more beautiful one.